Hello friends! Discount motivations. No, we're not having a sale on motivation. We're actually discounting motivations as an explanation for how human behaviors come about. And this comes out of a general sense that I have about human beings, that we spend entirely too much time on fruitless why questions. Why this? Why that? Why whatever? In general, I find that when I find myself tempted to ask a why question, if I ask the follow-up question, will answering this question actually improve my life in any way? The answer is usually no, right? So, why do we do it? There we are. Now I'm down this hole. Now I gotta answer this why question after just saying that why questions aren't useful to answer. It's alright. I'm comfortable in my hypocrisy. So, why do we spend so much time answering fruitless why questions, and in particular motivations? In the case of motivations, it has to do with a very flawed model of the world, that there are these sort of explanatory stories, these narratives that we can come up with, and those are the drivers of behavior. So the model is motivations exist in a human being, time passes, behaviors arise in said human being. And that is usually causally backwards, because human beings, while we may occasionally be rational, we are always rationalizing. We're very, very good, creative, and adept at coming up with explanations for behaviors after the behaviors happen. It was actually one of my favorite experiences as a young person studying that my best buddy in college, was the president of the philosophy club, now an esteemed doctor of philosophy, absolutely brilliant human being, one of the smartest people I've ever met, and he could convince himself of really anything that he wanted to believe. If he wanted to believe a certain course was the correct course, then he could darn well find a justification for that. And I got to watch, actually, one of the philosophy professors call him on it one day as he was narrating loudly in a cafe some of his recent personal dramas, and it just really struck me how it seems to be the case that the smarter you are, the better you are at inventing justifications for your behavior after the fact. And then that applies to other people as well. We can invent all sorts of stories about why other people are behaving a certain way, and depending upon if we feel charitable or uncharitable, those stories can be, very kind to that person. Oh, they must be having a hard day. Or if they're unkind, if we're not feeling charitable, they can be very unkind. That person's just an asshole. I did a whole video on that sort of thing, which is sometimes called fundamental attribution error. So somewhere up here, maybe I'll have an annotations don't exist anymore. Who cares? Somewhere there will be a link to it. Maybe down in the little description. We'll see. So, because of rationalization, motivations aren't very helpful, because we only really know as much as somebody tells us about their motivations, and for our own motivations, we only know as much as we tell ourselves. And in neither case is it very likely that that's going to be accurate in the slightest, because if you're looking at your own motivations, probably you're making it up after the fact to make a coherent story about your own self-image, right? So I've behaved in a certain way. Let me figure out some creative way to wrap this up so that it's actually consistent with my image of myself. And take that process and then add another layer of indirection and duplicity for anything you hear from other people about motivations. So it's kind of a hopeless project in that regard. Fortunately, we don't actually need to do any of it. We can focus instead on what behaviors happen and what are the contexts, and build an inventory of knowledge that under these circumstances, Bob behaves this way, or under these circumstances, I behave this way. And then we can just execute on plans for either mitigating other people's unfortunate behaviors or supplanting our own unfortunate behaviors. So all that time that we could spend either searching for, but really inventing an explanatory story of where these behaviors are coming from, we can just figure out what we're going to do about these behaviors. And in our own case, we can figure out, okay, I've identified these contexts. Maybe give them a nice name so we can get our pattern recognition hardware in our brains working in our favor. Oh, dang, I'm blowing up. Stop that. Oh, I lost it completely. So we can get our pattern recognition software. Oh, I'm such a technology geek, and I just have such a dysfunctional relationship with all telephony and internet messaging and whatnot. So there we are. They scramble my brain a little bit. Vestiges of startup life. So we can get our pattern recognition hardware in our brain working in our favor, identifying contexts that we know problematic behaviors tend to arise in. And if it's our own behavior, then we can have a plan for these are the behaviors that I am going to try to bring to the fore in this context to supplant the one that I'm maybe not having a great experience of. And this is the level of vigilance I'm going to bring to this process. And if it's somebody else's behaviors, we can just know, okay, Bob tends to behave in an unfortunate manner in these sort of circumstances. So I'm ready and prepared to take whatever steps I need to mitigate the effect that that has on me, whether that be just making sure that I'm vigilant to maintaining my own internal composure, or making sure that I set something up in the external world to make it so that Bob's unpleasantness doesn't cause generalized unpleasantness. Can we sandbox Bob? Can we make sure that in this context, he's not allowed to make it a miserable experience for ourselves or for the other people who have to share this situation? Executing on those plans is a far more effective use of one's limited cognitive resources than trying to invent an explanation for why Bob is being such a turd. Or in cases where we're manifesting unfortunate behaviors, why this unfortunate thing that's going on is actually consistent with my positive self-image of myself. Right? It's just fruitless to answer those particular why questions, so don't do it. Discount the motivations and jump right into the recognition of the behaviors that are arising and the contexts that tend to trigger those behaviors and plan accordingly.